I'm still gonna look to make this as approachable as we can. Um, so my background, I'm Paul Garcia. I recently retired from the Air Force.
Nice.
While I was at the Air Force, I was a pilot and operator, and then was looking for what's next, and I found kind of defense technology and modernization. I've been here in Oahu for 6 years. Um, I've been doing kind of defense tech modernization with both industry, government, military for about three. As I was kind of studying, examining the problem, working through this with so many different organizations, I was really looking for like a different solution. That's what I'll have us talk about. I'll kind of give a little background on myself, but I have a way cooler, smarter panel here, so I'll just lead. I'll be your moderator for some conversation. So the problem as we kind of saw it, or still see it today inside of where I was at PACAF, now as I've transitioned to just a U.S. taxpayer and motivated technologist that's trying to find people that want to help the mission, is the mission owners have a really difficult time validating what is working, and the entrepreneurs that are building or responsible for delivering a technology have a really difficult time finding or getting access to reliable signal to know that what they're building matters. So there's obviously sort of a disconnect that results in a bunch of wasted time, money, and the mission suffers. One of the things that PACAF actually funded, government hosted for us to do, where I met Kali and Travis, was what we'll just describe as the Combine, National Security or Defense Technology Combine. We assembled a group, a community of people that cared, and the theory was we're going to bring together mission owners, people that have really understood the problem, with industry, people that understood like a technical thing, a widget, and what it was capable of. And then the third, like most important ingredient, fortunately there are not many of them here today, but like your government or military decision maker. Like those three key things were really what we needed to have as an ingredient, and if we bring them all together, we thought we could make a big difference, and we did. For this particular event, there's a huge demand signal for this. We had over 1,500 applicants. We invited over 183 people attended. But what really matters is government was in the room in a unique format, something that was different, that drove unique conversations that, we had a lot of validation and success in sort of that face-to-face networking and building over actually the course of 5 days, shaping investments that had already been made. Government had invested in SBIR or whatever contracts they might have put into particular resources, but those investments often get sort of lost or distributed or fragmented with the help of mission owners and government decision makers to say, like, actually, I don't need you to make that button red, but I need you to make it blue. Maybe the small incremental things, those compound over time, and we've seen like really, really good success. So we learned some things at SigmaBlox that were obstacles in particular for industry, but also for the mission owners, and that's what I'm going to center the conversation on today with my panelists. Focus, trust, experience. I think these guys have been doing this for 25, 30 years in some cases, and then finally feedback. The closer we can get to the mission to be able to iterate and build on what we've learned, the better. So that said, we've got kind of just three basic questions here we're going to talk about, and I would encourage, please just like raise your hand. We have a microphone we could just sort of hand out to the crowd as well, maybe this one. He will control the volume, so if you're holding a mic and you're not using it, don't worry, it's off. It should be. And we'll get into these three questions, but without further ado, I'll let our panelists introduce themselves, and I'm going to sit down. We'll just stay seated at the table, and we'll make it a conversation.
Sounds great. Cleet Enos, I run a relatively small defense and federal software development firm. We work heavily in open source software. We do a lot of C2 applications, a lot of multi-domain applications, started in Department of Defense, a lot more in the federal space now, and I'll pass it along.
Good afternoon, Travis Steele. I'm a technologist by day, but engineer by trade. I had the opportunity over the last 25 plus years to work government, military, civilian as well, And then this side of the fence, I call it an industry, both defense tech and commercial. I've done a lot in C2, situational awareness, enterprise systems, and really taking end-to-end capabilities throughout global command and control, things like that. So appreciate being here, and thank you for those that came out today.
That's a pretty tall offer given all the bars are open right now, isn't it?
It's a lot to compete with.
Yeah. I'm Scott. I work for Google. I get the fun job of taking all the innovation that happens in Google in areas like search and AI, services that we as consumers use and businesses use, and bring them to the Department of Defense or war.
Thank you for joining us, and thanks everybody for being here. Kind of hear a conversation about collaboration, team building. I'll start with just a question. Klee, I'll let you take the first one here, but why should we, go ahead.
I'm smiling because you gave me a T-ball of a question, which I should have let you say, but is why should we be considering new technologies or new approaches? And I say it's a T-ball question, is the obvious answer is because the things we're doing now aren't working. So of course we should try something new because it's not working. My only note would be, we don't really need new approaches, we just need approaches that are new to us, because they're not new to the rest of the world. The challenge I think we face is that we don't have experience with them working for us, and so we usually never get over that activation energy to really try the new approach in a way that's going to work, and we never get that positive feedback to stick with it. So we should be considering it because it's that or lose.
And that especially in public sector compared to commercial sector, the velocity of change and what's possible is just like these two technologies are really diverging. Scott, I'm curious on the topic of new technology and collaboration. At Google certainly comes to mind. Can you speak to what your organization is doing or where you see opportunity?
Sure. Yeah, we've been investing for many years in ways to help organizations improve how they collaborate. So the idea of, here, let me send a physical attachment over, a logical attachment, and you work on it and send it back, that pace doesn't work in today's fast-paced mission as well as business environment. And so we look across the Department of War and we see a lot of places where they're adopting things that we as consumers know. And some of your companies might know this as well, workspace in particular. So that would be the first thing, is the improved collaboration, the improved speed and responsiveness of people working together, of environments like that. And the others, I'm sure we'll talk about AI a couple times in this panel. We might club it a bit as well, but AI is an increasingly meaningful part of how that collaboration happens, how work happens, and again, we'll talk more about that later.
Some of when I use the word collaboration, someone asked me a question earlier today. I think it's really worth mentioning here. The Indo-Pacific theater, like where we are, I mean, it's half the globe. Tyranny of distance. I think what some people don't fully appreciate, or it's very difficult to understand, is that the subject matter experts that we would need for a specific domain or action or component of warfare is extremely distributed. Like our posture, kind of in peacetime, is all over the globe. CENTCOM, EUCOM, on CONUS, as well as just throughout this theater. How do those teams work together? And then how do they maybe come together in a time of crises? I think it's just very interesting to me how technology is sort of at the center of that. Travis, how about any thoughts here on this topic or things that you've seen?
Yeah, I think we do have a tendency to think about the technology a lot, and when we think about what should change and why should we change, I think the urgency is about that we're moving to a warfighting posture. And the more we move to a warfighting posture, the more we have to understand that how we do things today, how we understand and apply the techniques and the processes and procedures that we have in place aren't going to work in a wartime environment. And that's the urgency in this theater that we need to all have. And I agree with Klee, right? It's not that we don't know how to do things better in public sector, or that government and military aren't capable of really discerning and urgent movement on new capabilities. What they lack sometimes is access to it, or an understanding of how do I unlock it. And that's what I think we can talk about. How do we open and unlock that capability?
Why? You said that the wartime user experience is going to be different. Why? I mean, how, like, is it just unsustainable for us to maintain the sort of posture that, like, we're talking here software, cyber, digital, like, it is a brand new domain. Can you speak to why you...
Well, yeah, I think you get into, we like to think of it as, software-defined warfighting, right? How we do business today, how we operate today we think of it as run the business, right? In a wartime environment where the things that you expect to use, things you talk about, collaboration, email, chat, things like that, things that you take for granted today, when they become unavailable in a moment, what do you do? What is your belt and suspenders? How do you maneuver, right? The Admiral talked about this morning, right? Maneuverability. In cyber, we need maneuverability across different platforms, different locations, different clouds. How do I enact and enable that? That's a very different operating model than our day-to-day run the business.
Clay?
No, in my spare time, I'm an Army cyber officer. I hang out with a bunch of Army signal officers, and you can give them a diesel generator and a couple of microwave antennas, and they will set up a very efficient mesh network with the one smart guy in the National Guard who does it for a living that just happened to end up stuck wherever they were. And, like, adversaries are out there in the civilian world. I'm not making light of it, but they tend to work like intelligence, and it's different when your adversary is blowing up anything that has an EM signature within 50 miles of it. It's just different, and it requires a different way of managing data, communications, and everything else. And I'd say, not to mention, we talk about the edge, but if we need microsecond decisions, we're not going to get them going over a link from, say, Guam to US East 1 or Ashburn, Virginia. Just physics doesn't let us do that.
It seems like there's understandably, though, a trade-off between, like, that velocity to build the tech that we need and security or compliance or cost even. Where do you see it working? Like, where are we most ready?
I kind of want to give the handoff to the Google guy, but one of the things that I've found when working with DoD is that they confuse cloud architectures, right? A modern flow of software development that's based on named services and data flows, and I won't try to describe it too well because it'll get worse the more I describe it, but containers, functions, processes, lots of scalability with lives on a Google-owned data center or a Microsoft-owned data center. And so I'll literally be talking to people about, just happened yesterday, I talked about, you can just put that in some VMs and it'll be much more isolated. And they say, oh, hell no, what if our link goes down? And I'm like, no, I just spent a VM like right there on your very computer. And so the cloud architectures are just better. They support centralized monitoring. They support unified security services. You've got some of the best cyber defense processes anywhere, and you can put that on other people's computers too quite nicely. So we need to learn from those experts that are defending against insane attacks on a daily basis while maintaining, I'll call it, sovereignty, for lack of a better word, of all of our systems.
Yeah, and it's not just the DoD that makes that point of confusion clear. I agree with the great points that you made. we think about the threats and this attack surface in a very different way. You know, we're a very soft commercial company. All commercial companies are soft, but like we're not an inherently military company. We have an inherently military group of us that bring this. But like we look at the cyber risk. Like that's a really I would describe it as our only warfighting domain at Google is in cyber. Like we think about how do we validate a security posture? How do we understand the actual threats that exist around the globe, the cyber threats? In fact, we even have country desks, much like in a U.S. intelligence agency, we'll have country desks, the China desk, a North Korea desk, an Iran desk. We have that for cyber. And the work that we've done is, this is really important to us because we serve consumers, we serve businesses, we want to understand these threats. And what we've been doing for a couple of years now is how do we externalize that and make it so that our customers can have first-party access to this kind of information, this kind of capability that we've typically thought of as native for Google. And yeah, you know, we think so our internal battles are they're things like speed and the pace of innovation, and that is a similar internal battle for the department, you know, for government. But it's hyper fast. If you look at the pace of the development of software, the pace of AI, you know, I think one of my colleagues was saying earlier in the Google booth that you know this model is the best for this week. You know, something's going to change next week, and it's this constant game of leapfrog, as opposed to you know what we're used to from years ago. Oh, it's a 2-year development cycle to produce something.
Let me ask a follow-up question. And this is really a question. This isn't meant to be leading. So I've worked with some Google SREs. I know the architecture that you have for very resilient failover, fallover distribution. And the only reason it's not suitable for DoD use is just that all of the failure points are not where the DoD is. Have you done work to export that kind of mesh resiliency to edge-facing systems? Is that I love the question. I will say that where that data is where the DoD is, okay. And we can deliver that at the edge. But the DoD has chosen to say we want our unclassified stuff in commercial data centers to not be where we are. We want that to live CONUS. Okay, we can do that. We'll put your stuff CONUS. Even though it's farther away. But all the principles of resilience, of redundancy, the way that we do our sharding and the double encryption, all those techniques that you know and some of you in the audience might know, apply to DoD workloads. So if, just to be extreme, a bomb goes off and takes out an entire data center, no, an entire region, that data is still safe. You know, Google was built many, many years ago on the principles of an RTO, a recovery time objective of immediate, and a recovery point objective of zero, of no data loss. Yeah, so it's a matter, and I'm sure this is going to come up later, of getting the customer to ask the right questions and make the right demands.
Yeah, and it's, to your point, Clee, it's a bigger problem as well because the compliance machine, the accreditation machine, I'm not calling it a security machine because it's a proxy for security, but not always a perfect one, has to think in ways that take advantage of how all of our companies do things in more modern ways.
Right.
Just to make sure I understand what you're saying about the DOW's choice to have that data at CONUS or in restricted areas, is that sort of like a second order effect, or you're saying it's a deliberate compliance decision that they're knowingly...
It's a deliberate decision, yeah, and I understand it. You know, what if the cloud service provider was to say, well, I'm going to put a data center in Iraq, in North Korea? Well, that may not be a good decision. But if you look at what industry is doing, we're not doing that because that doesn't make business sense. We're putting them in places that have a rule of law, and as a U.S. company, Google is, not all CSPs are. You would have to go through Google to sequester data, to get to data. So it's a much longer conversation and a fun, potentially boring stray from our panel here. But the penalty today is It takes a couple hundred extra milliseconds to get to my data. But what about in 2027? What's that penalty? That could be bigger, to have your data separately located. And if your answer to that is, well, let me just classify it and put it out on the edge, well, now you're starting to erode at the benefits of going to industry to get to modern AI, hyperscale, and all the capabilities that Clee was alluding to about how computing works in the modern world that industry can deliver.
That distribution would clearly be an asset, time of war. I think it'll be interesting to see. I do want to ask, are there other, like Google, you've talked about, I mean, we're spending a lot of time on this, but it's really interesting to me. I didn't know about those distributed nodes. So I'm curious, collaboration, like what processes, tools, or things, Scott, do you see that might have applicability here in the public sector that's underutilized?
I mean, everything, like the Red Hat stuff runs inside of Google Cloud. Lots of other third parties run inside of Google Cloud. So human collaboration in workspace. But there's, AI so in 2017, I think it was, we had a paper, a seminal paper called Attention is All You Need. And it was a basis for a transformer architecture. And a transformer architecture is the thing that's behind large language models. And we weren't ready to say, hey, let's just unleash this on the world. But other companies, because we're pretty open, so we published this paper, and people took these great concepts and made large language models. And 2 years ago, ChatGPT hit the 2 years ago, a year and a half, something like that. Anyway, and the world's not been the same since. And so now, there's Claude, there's Gemini, there's lots of LLMs, and now they're multimodal, not just language. But that's a big part of collaboration as well. So I need a research assistant where I can take a bunch of PDFs and PowerPoints and Google Docs and other things and give it to this research assistant, and then I want to ask it questions. Or I'm about to hit the car and I want it to give me a podcast, a custom podcast to answer my questions with 2 really smooth voices that I can listen to on the car ride. All those crazy ideas are now possible for anyone in the department.
Has anyone in this room, show of hands, used Notebook LM?
Wow.
Pretty much. There you go. That's
80%.
That's a lot of people. Yeah, 80% or thereabouts. It was a little bit of a shock and awe when I saw like what that was capable of. But it certainly just drives home the point of what's possible, what's coming, and sort of this direction. But you brought up an interesting point that brings us right into the second topic. You mentioned maybe a fallback, or a pitfall, I should say, to sharing what Google is and Red Hat. Both are synonymous with like open source. Clee, maybe you could start us off with how have you either leveraged, or where do you see the applicability is for open source software in public and defense sector?
Sure, it's almost too big a question, right? How have I used it? We do all of our work in and with open source. I'm an old school Debian developer, no offense to my compatriot over here, but it's probably the best and most successful software rivalry in the history of software is the Debian-Red Hat rivalry. So it's just better. It's better for everything, and it's specifically better for the Department of Defense, which needs radical flexibility, lack of vendor lock-in. We can publish MOSA memos all day long, and people will look at them and say, oh, how cute. And we certainly need a robust, competitive, commercial ecosystem packaging things on top of these foundations. But if we don't own the foundations of our technology and our data in a way that gives us best alternatives to the commercial products that are viable and a fundamental set of things that we can reconfigure. You just taught me, was it flexibility is the foundation of air power? Flexibility is absolutely the foundation of combat power in a modern environment. And then I'll just indulge in my other soapbox, which is we're the United States of America. We invented a lot of this stuff, right? We are the plank holders. We owned the space. I cannot imagine for the life of me why we would take the foundations of our IT and cyber infrastructure and abandon them when we literally own all the prime real estate in intellectual space. I love that when I go download a system from the internet, it's written in English. That is a luxury and a benefit that I take for granted, and I don't know why we wouldn't want to be able to keep taking that for granted for the next 30 to 50 years. With all respect to all of our partners across the world, it's nice to be in the lead. I don't know why we would just take a knee in the middle of things. So you may tell I'm a passionate advocate of open source for the United States government, which is why I'm glad to be sitting next to Red Hat and Google here today.
Here, here.
That's right.
I think both. Travis, any comments on
Yeah, I appreciate what Clee said, and I try to think about it in a couple ways. So one is, why is there a culture that doesn't embrace it, right? And I think, government, military, the culture that is driven from early days, and it's in the DNA, is to be closed, is to be protective, and not to be transparent, and not to have this mindset that, if you're open and transparent, then, what does that mean for the adversary understanding your capabilities and what you're doing, et cetera? The reality is that open source is won. It's won the day. You can look at, there's a lot of statistics and data out there, but, roughly 97% of all software applications has open source components. That's audited code bases. Over 900 components of open source are in every single application. Almost 96% of organizations are internally augmenting with open source. So it's there, it's pervasive, and it's unlocking innovation. And the transparency is allowing for more eyes, more brain power, more mind share. And as Scott said earlier, when you publish things, whether it be contributing your code to the upstream as we do, and others, whether you're iterating in an upstream community, that transparency allows for what I think the military really cares about is interoperability. And that is what most is trying to get after, right, in its context, but it's about interoperability. If we don't have the ability to share information, data, source, and be interoperable, then there is no way that we can outpace the adversary in what we're doing. So that's what open source to me means in the context of winning the fight.
Just a quick note on the security, just a very real world example, and I'll blur some of the details. Someone I know works on some very security critical internet software and doesn't have a clearance, doesn't pay attention to threat. He's just pure nerd, cares about code. And I've watched him spike into the ground 3 different patches to the software based on, one was just a vibe check, the other 2 were, I don't like the way this is being done. All of which were nation state attacks through a proxy on the security of that system. He has no idea where those come from. All of this is something I learned in unclassified space, so I'm not obviously revealing anything here. But that's real, right? Nerds are a great defense. I forget the line, but when you have 1,000 eyes, all bugs and all security attacks are shallow. So just a real world example of that playing out.
That's really neat. There are 2 things that I thought about that are really cool outcomes to me from Travis's observation. The solved problem aspect of open source means that somehow we have figured out the data rights of including open source with all of its copyleft, I think is the word, and incorporating that into things that are in operation, in production, and sold, like in industry. Like that's the hard problem. We're still trying to figure that out in the AI and data world. Like it's pretty simple. You bring data, you have AI models, there's still arguments all over the place across this industry. So that's one neat thing. And the other thing I'm seeing across our customers is that open source is making people, they can go find new opportunities. There's a level of compatibility, of fungibility that exists on the employment scene that wouldn't otherwise exist. Even inside of Google, it's like, hey, this person worked on YouTube and now they're in the Google Cloud division. And then they're going to go work on Android because of these common underpinnings of the technology.
That is an interesting contrast to the silos and stovepipes that we at least criticize within public sector. Maybe that's an artifact of, I don't know, compliance or closed systems.
I'll propose a soundbite, which is that open source makes you compete on the merits rather than on your ability to create a monopoly.
Yeah, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I thought this was an important topic, I mean, and there's a variety of reasons open source and open source software is important, but you know, when I retired, I lost my CAC. So today I don't have access to any secure systems until we do all the paperwork, compliance, and get all the things squared away. So it's you know, kind of living that experience that is, how do we have a lot of closed systems, but also struggle providing access to data. Travis, is there anything that you've seen that you think is helping improve the ability for people to collaborate together on sensitive information?
I think there's a focus to, and there's definitely an attempt to democratize access to data, right? Remove the roadblocks, the pathways, make it more accessible. You know, I'm going to pivot a little bit because earlier in the discussion, one of the things that was really key to me when we were talking about, you know, Google's architecture and resiliency, and data is a big element of that. I was thinking about, you know, in a distributed C2 construct, right? We have a non-ubiquitous architecture. You just mentioned stovepipe, legacy. That's going to be there tomorrow. That's not going anywhere. We're not going to modernize our way out of it fast enough. And so we have to democratize to enable these new capabilities, AI application tools, et cetera, and the data that's necessary to run those and leverage those. We have to remove the barriers to that data, and we have to use open standards to do that. We have to allow, and that goes back to the open source element, right? Of how do we allow code bases and other things that people can say, I can get easy access to data. I don't have to be a data scientist. I don't have to have special rights or privileges to access that data. I can get the data that I need, and it may not be all the data, but it's the data I need at the time of need. So there's a lot of efforts, there's a lot of great examples. I wouldn't want to pick one because somebody watching might say, oh, that's not a good, you know, but I think there's a concerted effort along those ways. And, you know, industry partners like Red Hat and Google are examples where we are working together and are trying to create that availability in a non-ubiquitous environment.
I love the point of the technology approach. That's so important to solving that problem. We've all been doing this work supporting government for so many years, and one of the things I find most cringeworthy, like I almost want to cry when I see this, is the non-technical barriers that get in the way of this data access, where the data to solve this problem, and you know, great example is in the department in the DoD world, healthcare data, getting access to health, that's there, all well documented, but there are you know, organizational barriers or, you know, political barriers, but that's an easy way to just describe away something. But somebody's job is to have that data and they don't have the authority to share, or they don't think they have the authority to share, and that is a really, really hard problem. I mean, when Google was small, we were pretty good at solving that problem. As we've grown, we're finding it harder to solve that problem. And part of it's just where is the data, but that's almost a different problem. It's this idea that so let's talk about how we fix that, or how we could fix that. One is culture. right? Do we have a culture of sharing? And the young Google, the approach was whenever I put a file in our storage system, Google Drive, for those of you that are familiar with Google Workspace and Google products, the default was anybody in the organization can see it. Any division anywhere in the world, anybody can see it. And it was great because when I would put my resume in there or put in this brief on a project I was working on, somebody in another country that needed to make some progress or needed to find somebody with a certain skill, they could find that. And it was great. And I knew that if it's like, well, this is my something sensitive, I would change the permission and it wouldn't be accessible. So just the cultural tenet of I'm here to share and I'm here to help other people do their jobs in addition to my team doing their job, that's so important. You know, the other thing is, I guess, tools and systems. So in one of the medical problem we were trying to solve, the idea of being able to figure out where that data is. You know, CDAO with their Advanta platform has been getting after this very problem. How do I get data shareable? Well, if people don't have access to data, let's at least let them know where that data is, that there's something there. Oh, you're looking for TBI, traumatic brain injury data? That's there. And here's here's a data owner that you can go talk to request that. But then we have to fix it so that the data owner says, I see the problem you're trying to solve, and I appreciate that, and I'm gonna give you access to that. But too often the measurements, which is the final part, are misaligned. I want job security or I want relevance, and so I believe the way to get that is to clutch my data, is to keep it to myself. But if I can see the value of solving a bigger problem where I can be rewarded or viewed positively because my data, my process, my work helped to solve a bigger problem, that's going to change my way of thinking.
Yes, and the government has so many layers of decision makers that I think we just compound what you're describing. I think it's really simple to just say, like, how do we get to yes? That's what we're kind of looking for here. I will ask one more question on this. Like, how can we incentivize the sharing of data?
I've got two ideas for you. And I'm almost cheating a little and stealing the question because I want to highlight something that you said. But I think it's similar, which is you mentioned technology being an important part of the solution. And I think we can't emphasize that enough on the government side. We need to find ways to embed extreme technical expertise into every organic element, because you've got to have people wearing the uniform in positions of trust that know the game and can recognize quality, can recognize what's real, what's really MOSA. And I'll give a Google example, which is we talked about security, we talked about data. Google's got and it's not just Google, other people have it too, but Google put a ton of effort into it, an incredible capability for secure computing, where you take your data, you encrypt it, you give a key with it, you wrap it in like 5 layers of tinfoil, you send it to their computers. Google doesn't see it, their computer doesn't see it. The tiniest little box inside one of their computers gets to unlock it for the tiniest piece of time, do its work, send it back to you. For all purposes, Google has no idea what it just did for you, it just did it. That is an immense game-changing service, because suddenly I'm not putting my whole network at risk or my whole system at risk. I'm very tightly scoping my risk of anything I do in any incremental way. If you don't have someone in the government who can actually read that paper and talk to him and be like, yeah, no, this is real, there are 99 fake versions of what I just described out there that are hot garbage. And there's no shade to the F-22 pilot who's been told, you're a PEO now, go buy something. But you've got to give them those technical resources to understand that and pick something that's good.
Yeah, Clee, and to your point, a group of really highly paid ex-CEOs that think about DoD, the Defense Innovation Board, agreed with your exact point. And it's not just about, is this infrastructure good? It's, acquiring AI. It's how do I solve problems? We need to bring technical expertise back into the department.
Yep. And to recognize people who are trying to build something sustainable. So if I can cheat and talk about the other barrier is that we're used to products and weapon systems. We want to buy a thing, we want it to work out of the box. I'm an Army guy. I don't want you to give me a Hornady reloading equipment and a bag of black powder and a whole bunch of lead. I want an M4 and a bunch of bullets in a box, right? I don't want to print drones and launch them at the enemy. I want to take drones out of my backpack and throw them at the enemy. Can I do a real world story? They give me an electronic knee board. It's garbage. It is absolute garbage. I was never in danger from the enemy, but I sure as hell was in danger from my electronic knee board because it made me type 38 character strings to send messages to other aircraft. So I go in there and I change the strings in the binary so that I can write to like HQ, so I'm not staring at my knee the whole time. That led to an official Army investigation because the product owner of that product complained about me hacking their system, and it was a big mess. Forgive the sales pitch, but Red Hat wouldn't have pulled that on me, right? The Red Hat product would have had layers of technology that were primarily open source or government owned at a minimum, and a little bit of stuff on top that they support and charge money for because they have to pay their guys. We have no good way in the government to say that openness has value. We have no good way to make that oh, this is more open, I'm going to preference that because it's better value to the government. We don't measure it, so we don't buy it. And I'll let a government guy tell me how to fix that one.
Don't look at me, that's not me.
Yeah. Right? Look for somebody with a star on their shoulder to walk into the room.
One thing I would just add real quick on the answer to the data piece is perhaps think about data a little bit differently at times too. And Zero Trust is going to drive a little bit of this anyway, right? Whether people like it or not, but every transaction is going to be a challenge going forward. Every data transaction is going to be interrogated. Where we need data and where we need complete access to data, perhaps we should consider a data armory model. Pre-position that just like we pre-position munitions and force readiness and personnel and assets. And then maybe you can get rid of some of those barriers in the AOR, in the environment that you're needing at that time.
I think we're certainly seeing a shift back, sort of pendulum back and forth between virtual data centers and cloud, back to edge or on-prem infrastructure. But is that when you say a digital armory, do you mean where it's physically located, or?
Well, think about it this way, right? Because you brought up edge was mentioned before, and we talked about AI. That distributed C2 and that distributed functionality, we're going to rely less and less. We need to rely less and less on those data centers anyway. So pre-positioned data in the AOR, make it accessible and completely open, and you're going to limit the function that you need to go back to anywhere outside of the AOR, because you're going to process more, you're going to do more at that edge.
I do want to touch on something that I think is at the core of a lot of this, and that's the workforce development, the skill sets to be able to navigate a lot of this. I brought up the how do we incentivize, and we kind of led with technology, or by showing government sort of what's possible. I have found, I asked the Notebook LM question because I think let's, if they haven't seen it, see this podcast just emerge out of nothing, and then think about all the places where you might be able to use something like that if we can get past the no's and figure out how to get to yes. They're like power tools for our workforce, but I've just been, the adoption seems extremely, it's slow, honestly, at least here. I think there's a lot of effort going into this, but it's very fragmented or siloed.
It is.
Are you seeing, Scott, do you have any thoughts on that? Are you seeing progress in your lane.
The adoption is slow, and if it was anything other than AI capabilities, I wouldn't be so worried. AI is one of those things that matters, and it's going to matter more. In fact, the Deputy Secretary of Defense a couple terms ago, Bob Work, said that AI is the third offset. An offset's a thing that gives a nation sustained military advantage. Nuclear was an offset. Precision-guided munitions was an offset. The third, he said, was AI, and I don't disagree with that. That's not something that I want our country not being, we can't be third. We can't be second at figuring that out and putting it to advantage for the purpose of defense. So I think it's important. I agree with the observation, unfortunately, that we're not learning it at the rate that we need to. And there are ways to fix that, but.
Earlier, Clay, you mentioned and described it as like a weapon system. And getting that into the hands of an operator. I was thinking about our experience as pilots. If I'm a F-18 or F-22 pilot or a H-60 pilot, like I have an entire training pipeline that prepares me to go out and use that system. No one, at least, is really ready for the level of impact that we're seeing from AI. And if a pipeline like that even needed to exist or is going to exist, it's going to take a while to sort of react. So what are some immediate ways that we can improve or learn what's possible with these tools that you've seen, Clee?
I'm going to immediately jump on a grenade and get myself in trouble with someone. I'm not exactly sure who. I've been doing Army cyber for about a decade. I've watched Air Force cyber. I've seen Marine Corps cyber. Fantastic people, absolutely fantastic people. I particularly love the Marines because I can see their bias towards violence in the cyber domain, and it's really fun to see it translated. To build the culture of domain knowledge and excellence and sort of respect, like aviation is different than other kinds of combat, and the armed forces understand that. They understand how it works. They understand how to respect the things that make aviation different. We have not done a flawless job of translating that to cyber. I have, at some time in my past, been told, you guys are going to Meade soon. You're going to be with the active duty. I need to see you doing PT every day to get ready. And I'm like, I wanted to be teaching them how to use Jira and Git and make SSH keys. And they looked at me like but you don't have a 300 on the PT test yet. That cultural change isn't going to happen in time. We just don't have time for it. It is happening. It's happening well, and we don't have time for it.
Yeah.
We need to recognize that information is a completely different domain of warfare and stand up a branch. I await getting fired from the Army for that. But,
Urgency. I mean, as a pilot, the ground has a probability of kill of 1. So it's very urgent and visceral that safety is paramount. And so that's why, but I think in this domain,
let me do a survey question real quick. How many flight hours do you have?
about 2,500.
2,500. How many hours on keyboard do you have?
Oh my God, 25,000?
Yep, probably same.
Yep.
At least 25,000. And I don't care how smart you are. I have great respect for young engineers. There's some element of putting in the reps. If you don't have 10,000 hours of like, why is this pointer null, or why is this AI telling me something insane, or how come all of my vectors converge to NaN when I try to train the new model? You need those hours, and I don't think you can balance it with a military career. I think we have to accept that we need massive technological dominance, and it makes its own pipeline.
Yeah. I was just going to add, because I was thinking about the question and Scott's answer, and it's a prioritization question and a readiness question, like you're talking about, and how is the change of readiness implement this new thing, right? Where AI and cyber should be priority 1. Force projection for how many years has been kinetic based, not non-kinetic based. So that's a culture that's very slow to adopt and very slow to recognize where we are headed. It's also in traditional force projection, those things take a long time to build up over time. This is a rapidly moving, you mentioned ChatGPT coming on the scene 2022. That just brought the realization to the general world about Gen AI. We're talking about Gen AI here. We're moving way past that already, right? We should be talking about agentic workflows. That's what we should be talking about. Gen AI it's already, but we're not because of the adoption slow. Now, sure, there's still some things that need to mature even in agentic, but the reality is that is the pace in which we should be learning new muscles, training new muscles, getting new perspectives of how to think differently about the problem set and get after it. That's what needs to be prioritized. It's very slow. How do we do that? We need to get back to where the government not just brings back technical expertise within the ranks, but also, just like we're talking about with opening the data, open the kimono, be more open with industry. Be at the table together with a shared common purpose, understanding that there's only one way forward, and it is together. Not, hey, we want to work with, not the things that we always say at every one of these things that we've heard for years, we all know, but the actual activities that demonstrate that we're going to be working together, right? Whether we're competitors, work together one day, work against each other another, that's the only way we're going to change that adoption to get after things that we really need to focus on.
For the sake of time, I can hear it's quieted down behind us. I don't want them to turn the lights off on us in here. I'd like to give everybody kind of a final thought. I will at least comment how I'm a little disappointed. There's a lot of circumstances that went into it, but I thank you, everybody here, for being with us. I don't know if we have any govies or military government service members that were able to be here today, but hopefully they can see this. Scott, any final thoughts or words of wisdom on what we've shared today?
Well, for me, you're probably asking the wrong guy for words of wisdom, but I will say this. Learn AI. Regardless of what you do, AI has the power to help, and it has the power to disrupt, and it will. It can be just, I got to ask a question, and I know what to do. I'm going to go to my favorite search engine and search it. But let me try asking an AI agent. It's going to take a little longer because you haven't done that before, and you got to figure out how am I going to do that. You got to locate it. But you're going to learn. You're going to understand how this thing works. You're going to understand multimodal. You're going to get agentic. You're going to understand how AI works and how when it makes a mistake badly. You'll learn all kinds of really cool things. And then one day you'll surprise yourself because you'll be doing something at work and be like, oh, I know how AI could really help. And that would have taken me like a couple days, but now I can do this probably in a couple minutes. And it will just help you be a better citizen of this better steward of this really, really important capability.
Travis.
So my advice would be that we all, we have a shared opportunity, and we all fall, I think, at times, I did just a moment ago, right, getting passionate, and we expose through these things the challenges, frustrations, and complexities. But the reality is, it's not insurmountable. As hard as it seems, as frustrating as it might be, these things are achievable. And it is the reason why, for example, I came here, even though the shutdown and that, is because you never know the conversation, the collaboration, the people that you might meet that might influence you, you might influence. So this stuff really matters, and we can't solve it over a conference call, a VTC, or a Google Meet. It's got to be in shared rooms, shared environments, shared adult beverages, things like that. So.
I'll lead my final thought with a question. Are there any government people in this space right now?
Willing to say it.
One. All right. Then I will only say if you want openness and collaboration, I'd urge you to recognize that you have all the power in the room. You can get it if you want it. Find that angry lieutenant or that angry E6 and say, can you come over here and help me filter out what's real and what isn't, and make us all work for our money, because we love to compete. And we love it when the government asks for difficult things where we can actually show our value. And with that, I give the balance to my time.
I want to say thank you. Thank you to the panelists for sharing all these insights. And thank you to everyone here. You've traveled all the way here. You clearly, this is not easy. And you obviously care. So thank you for your time, and we'll be available hereafter if you have any questions.
Thank you. Thank you.